And we will begin. Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs, and welcome to COM 416. This class is called Propaganda. It is an upper level, advanced elective for students at the Harrington School of Communication and Media, and I have some of the best students. So some of them are actually right here as we speak. Today's date is April 16th, and our topic is a complicated and messy one, the topic of entertainment propaganda. So who do I see here? I see both Jessicas. Yes, that's half of my Jessica and Olivia combination there. I've got the two Jessicas tonight, Tom and Pam. So let me share with you what I'm hoping to do tonight. I actually feel deeply conflicted about this topic. So we've kind of been on a really interesting journey, just to kind of remind you, right? So I'm just going to scroll. Ever since the midterm, really, it got kind of dark, right? Right after the midterm, we started messing around with computational propaganda and virality. We had got to encounter Noam Chomsky and his idea that news was a form of propaganda. Then we went and looked at partisanship and the polarization and political partisanship that's dividing our country. Last week, we tackled terrorism, including well-meaning terrorism, like what the British suffragettes did to try to win over the vote, but then also really destructive terrorism, like ISIS propaganda. And now we're tackling this topic of entertainment propaganda. In a way, it's kind of intriguing that entertainment propaganda comes at the end of the semester. And I think in some ways, as we come to the end of the semester, we also might want to be thinking about what we did at the beginning, right? You know, endings and beginnings have a lot in common. And when we started this class, we defined propaganda with a whole bunch of different definitions. Tonight, what I want to do is really introduce you to a guest lecturer who is going to talk to us about entertainment propaganda. He's a guy that I encountered in my own youth as a graduate student. Somebody who, I don't even know, he's probably dead now, right? But thanks to the miracle of the internet, he's still alive, and his 1989 lecture on propaganda and entertainment is still with us. I will warn you, it's a fascinating and troubling lecture. We're only going to listen to the first 12 minutes, and 12 minutes is a long time, which is why we have to start watching it right away. But here's basically our task for viewing tonight. As we watch this, it's really just a audio lecture with somebody else put some slides to go with it. I don't think Parenti did, somebody else did. As we listen to the lecture, we're basically trying to figure out, well, what are his main ideas, right? That's the first question. What are his main ideas? And are his ideas still true today? Because 10, 20, we're talking 30, more than 30 years, right? 1989, 99. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time since he made this speech. So as you watch, you're making notes on your notebook. What are his main ideas? And then on the other side, we're reflecting, are his ideas still relevant today? Give me a thumbs up if you understand what our task is. Okay, good show. We're going to watch it together on the big screen here, and then we'll come back and have a conversation. I'll see if I can make it as big as I can.
You're tuned to WEOS Geneva, WXXE.
Give me a
Fenner,
thumbs up if you can see that.
The talk we're about to hear by Dr. Michael Parenti is titled Rambo and the Swarthy Hordes. Michael Parenti is an author and political analyst. Among his books are The Sword and the Dollar, Inventing Reality, History is Mystery, and his latest, The Terrorism Trap. This talk was given in 1989 in North Hollywood, California, during the administration of George Bush I, an administration consisting of most of the same players that occupy positions in the present Bush administration. In the talk, Parenti looks at the entertainment media as a propaganda vehicle for American ruling class interests and attitudes. With the recent spate of war movies and TV shows glorifying the CIA, FBI, and police, this 13-year-old talk is eerily relevant. Control of media is even more concentrated now than 13 years ago, as most major media outlets are subsidiaries of massive corporations with interests in a variety of areas, including armaments. At the time this talk was given, Saddam Hussein was a great friend of the United States, and Osama bin Laden was, in the words of the great communicator Ronald Reagan, the moral equivalent of America's founding fathers.
I want to today give attention to the other side of the media, not the news media, but the entertainment media, because the entertainment media consumes a much larger share of the viewing time of most Americans than do the news programs. And I thought I would call this book something like The Hidden Political Images of the Entertainment Media. And then as I thought about it, I said, well, what's so hidden about it? It's rather blatant. And what I looked at are Hollywood films. That's what I'm studying. Hollywood films and TV dramas, TV miniseries, teleplays, and the like. What I find is a real abundance of images and ideologies, ones that are essentially supportive of imperialism, anti-communism, capitalism, racism, sexism, militarism, say militarism twice, militarism, authoritarian violence, vigilantism, and anti-working class attitudes. More specifically, I found these kinds of themes. Individual heroics predominate over collective action. There's almost no collective action. There's almost no story or drama where the people organize together and do something for themselves. I mean, one or two exceptions. When they do, when there's collective action, they're usually led by some hero who has to spur them on and really do the whole thing himself. Free enterprise is the best economic system in the world. That's a message which is not necessarily telegraphed so much as it is presumed. Certainly, there's nothing positive ever uttered about alternative systems in the entertainment media. Private monetary gain is a central and worthy objective of life, although those who are too wickedly greedy, the Dynasty guys and Dallas fellows, they can meet with disapproval. Sometimes business characters are insensitive to other people's needs because they're so busy with their business activities, but when properly apprised of the problems and such, they are suddenly capable of legendary acts of generosity, which I've never seen in real life, but I see on television dramas. Say, the kid needs the house, give it to him. They give it to, oh, give the factory to Joe, he's a good guy, and all that sort of thing. Workers are beer guzzling, regular Joes, I mean, good-natured and all that, but really not very bright, incapable. If I was to say any one consistent stereotype I've seen about how blue-collar people are portrayed in the media, with the exception of certain films. By the way, everything I say, there are a few notable exceptions. With the exception of a film like Silkwood or A Matter of Sex, a few others, they're almost always incapable of leadership and of acting as agents of their own lives. One wonders really where labor unions came from. Labor unions are always up to not much good. They're rather insensitive to the needs of workers. Some years back, there was a TV program, Archie Bunker, All in the Family, which was supposedly against various forms of bigotry. And while it came out against the bigot, who was Archie Bunker, and made a little message statement against bigotry, every program practiced a bigotry of its own by portraying the working person as this goof and goon. And one of the big laugh lines in All in the Family was when Archie Bunker mispronounced a word, committed a malapropism, and the canned laughter would come on. That's not funny. There's nothing funny when somebody mispronounces a word. I mean, all you're saying is that he hasn't had the opportunity to have the education that some other people have had. But class bigotry is a very common form of bigotry, and it remains totally unchallenged, unlike gender bigotry or race bigotry, which at least is challenged today. The practices and forms of class bigotry go on in abundance in the media and remain unchallenged. Affluent professionals in almost all programs are considered much more interesting than blue-collar or ordinary service workers. There are many more of them as principal characters. Women and ethnic minorities are really not as capable, effective, or interesting as white males. Cop shows, the police and everyone else should be given a freer hand in combating the large criminal element in America, using generous applications of force and violence without too much attention to constitutional rights. In fact, in any number of cop shows, the cop will get up and talk about that Constitution isn't going to protect you, it's only me with my gun, and the hell with the Constitution. The ills of society are caused by individual malfactors and not by anything in the socioeconomic system. No. There are some unworthy persons in our established institutions, but they are eventually dealt with and set straight for the most part. U.S. military force is directed only toward laudable goals, or more often the goals are not even stated. It's just assumed that we've got to win this one. Nothing said about what kind of interests are involved. I mean, after all, why are people doing all this fighting and killing? It's a question that remains largely unstated. Western industrial and military might, especially the U.S.'s, has been a civilizing force for the benefit of backward peoples throughout the Third World. The United States and the entire Western world have long been threatened from abroad by foreign aggressors, such as the Russians, communist terrorists, Arab terrorists, and generally the swarthy hordes of less developed peoples. Those are, I would say, some of the general themes that come up again and again in any number of movies. And the last one is the one I want to focus on today. It's the paradigm of the wagon train versus the swarthy hordes. First enunciated very well by a marvelous article by Tom Engelhardt in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. It could be happening in the American Wild West. It could be in the Amazon jungle, the North African desert, the Sudan, the Transvaal, the South Pacific jungles, or Indochina. The scene is generally the same. There's a fort, or an encampment, or a wagon train, and inside that encampment are the human beings. They're white. They're human. They're warm, they're attractive, they talk, and they're nice. Outside come the swarthy hordes, the savages. They can be Indians, they can be Bushmen, they can be Arabs on camels and horses or whatever else. And they are these subhumans, and they are attacking the human beings. And the wagons form their circle, and the human beings know what to do. They level their guns and they begin to knock off, shoot, and kill these screaming savages who attack them. Why do the swarthy hordes attack the white people? You don't know. I'm going to tell you. Is it to protect their lands? Is it to protect their herds? Is it to protect their villages and their towns and their families and their children? No, it's just because they like to do that. That's their thing. They like to attack. And so they have to be killed. And by the way, it's not even bravery that they manifest as they charge in great numbers and get cut down in horrible numbers. This is not even bravery, although similar acts by whites would be portrayed as heroic. This itself is portrayed as a manifestation of the swarthy hordes, their fanatic, crazed way of wanting to bloodlust. Now, the trouble with this paradigm is that it turns the history of the last 400 years on its head. That it reverses the roles of usurper and usurped. It reverses the roles of victim and victimizer. It reverses the roles of those who were massacred and those who were doing the massacring. It was the European and North American civilizers, so-called, who went in there and destroyed the villages and destroyed their industries and destroyed their townships. Read Engels on North Africa, what happened to the Arabs and Berbers, and when he goes in and describes the beautiful towns with the fine, hard stone and plaster buildings and their woolen industries and their mining industries and their arts and crafts and all that. And then read the description of the French troops coming in and systematically destroying it and killing every man, woman, and child. Read about how the Germans went into South Africa and killed the Herero tribe. 80,000 people, they killed 60,000 of them, and the other 20,000 they used as slave labor in their minds. Read Mark Twain's angry, raging comments about King Leopold of Belgium, calling him a mad dog and what he did to the innocent, unoffending people of the Congo, taking them and enslaving them, 1 million of them a year dying in the mines in the Congo. That's what the history's about. That's what John Wayne is about. And what these films do is they reverse that history, stand it on its head. They do what Joseph Goebbels said. They give you a big lie, and they embellish it, and they make you root for the guys in the wagon train. Now, once you kill and once you plunder like that, once you go in to take another people's land and steal their labor and enslave their labor and take their resources and preempt and take over their markets, once you do that kind of act, and it wasn't the ordinary people of Europe and North America that did it, it was the ruling interest that did it, and they used our taxes, our money, and our sons to go fight. But once you do that, you have to do two other things ideologically and psychologically. One, you have to deny the humanity of your victims. They are subhumans and they're moral inferiors. As John Wayne said in one of his horse operas in 1953, he said, "There's humans and then there's Comanches." A very clear message. He couldn't have said it better. There's humans and then there's Comanches. You're not killing human beings. You're killing these wild animals. By the way, you get the same quotes from Winston Churchill about the Afghanis. You can get the same quotes from George Washington about American Indians, and you can get them from any number of imperialists. The second thing you do is you must ascribe all your crimes to them. You deny your own inhumanity, and you accuse your victims of doing to you what you have been doing to them all along.
Whoa. Okay. Right. Okay. So that was the first 12 minutes of Michael Parenti's speech. I guess tonight, in a way, he served as a kind of guest lecturer. So our first question is, what were his main ideas? And our second question is, are these ideas still relevant 30 years after he gave that speech? What are your thoughts?
Yes.
Okay, first, what were his main ideas? And why do you think those ideas are still relevant 30 years later?
I came in like midway through as it was playing. So with that in mind, I feel like he kind of had this idea of how, because like the white mainstream kind of owns media in a sense, they made like, oh, cowboy movies and the Indians are the villains of some sort, and in all actuality, like, they had you rooting for the people invading the Indian territory, or they had you rooting for the people in Africa that were enslaving the Africans and committing genocide against them. They had you rooting for them, and how the Africans is the villain when they were in fact the victims, and they could get away with this image because they essentially won, I guess. So that would still be like relevant today, in a sense that like even on television,
Uh-oh, we lost you. Anthony, we got this idea that you saw one big idea in the speech about this idea that through entertainment propaganda, viewers can be induced to switch their loyalties, to feel loyal for the ruling class, even when that works against their own interests, right? So that's one big idea that was definitely presented in this film. Other people's response, what were the big ideas in this speech, and are these claims still relevant 30 years later? Why or why not? Who's next?
I mean, I think it's still really relevant, although probably like incorporating some more dated examples. It's still like a really good kind of like, and I guess maybe for those who already are critical of like what they're watching, maybe like not something that's new to them, but I think that, I mean, it describes how like I guess like entertainment media is pushing like a really narrow mindset, like pro-business, American idealism, where like he talked a lot about like pro-imperialist mindsets that like give us the impression that we are consuming like a wide range of ideas when it's like not really true.
Yeah, so this narrow mindset, he said one feature of the narrow mindset was that working people, right? He said there was class bigotry, that working people were always depicted as not very bright, not very capable, not very competent, and certainly not able to, participate in decision-making in society. And I wonder, is that still true today? How are working people depicted in the media that you encounter, in your social media or in your video games or in the TV shows or the movies that you watch?
Well, I would say that all of the isms that Parenti talks about, that Hollywood promotes, sexism, militarism, racism, I think they're all still there, but I think the fact that there's a lot that this is strange because I just heard something on NPR today about how there are less women directors and producers in Hollywood now than there were in the 20s or 30s. But we hear about those women, and I think we see some more sort of women-oriented films, and certainly more Black directors are out there making films. But it's almost like his point about films about unions, that they're few and far between. I think that's still the case with the alternative view to the rich white male hegemony kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. That's a great point, that we do see more diversity, but you say it's still within this constraint of dominance. One thing that Parenti says is that entertainment media presents the ills of society are all caused by single individuals working alone. What do you think about that comment? Is that still true? And like, so what if the ills of society are all presented as if they were an individual's moral failings that caused the bad things to happen? Why is that a form of propaganda?
Well, do you mean like it's presented as something that's on an individual level, like it's not a collective thing, or it's like not connected to more than just the individual's perspective?
Yeah, so we think about the school shooting, right? It was a bad actor who walked in and shot the kids down, or the idea that the banking crisis was a bunch of bad guys, right, who made bad decisions.
So that kind of reminds me of the idea that, like, in general, I guess, like, maybe he was kind of getting at this as well. It's like when it's entertainment media, people don't, when they see it, I guess, through a lens of entertainment, it's kind of like taken in a different light, versus, I guess, like, same kind of idea goes with when you see it as like, oh, it's just one person's perspective, or you think like, oh, it's not really a problem because it's on an individual level, when in reality, that's not the case.
Right. And you're making a really good point, because maybe that's something to do with the nature of storytelling, right? Storytelling always has to have a protagonist, that is, a single individual, and bad things happen to that single individual, right? Conflict, problems, and then it gets resolved. So maybe storytelling as a sort of built-in bias to favor the idea that it's all about individual actions, not about collective actions that people do together. Now, Parenti's boldest and most dramatic claim is that entertainment media turns history upside down, reversing the roles of the victims and the victimizer. In some ways, you might agree with this, and in other ways, this is really harsh. What are your thoughts on that bold claim that Parenti makes? Is it a claim you agree with or disagree with, or what?
I personally wasn't super sure what he meant by that.
Right. So reverses the roles of the victim and the victimizer. So he said, in our cowboy and Indian movies, we turn the Indians into the bad guys.
Right.
But really, the white people were the bad guys, right? And he said, in South Africa, right, it was King Leopold who was the bad guy enslaving the Africans, but the stories that got told were all about the bad Africans, right? So the idea is I think the claim is entertainment stories make the truth into the opposite of the thing. The U.S. government is the good guy, when in fact the U.S. government was the dangerous force, right? So reversing the role of victim and victimizer.
But I would say that that's not limited to entertainment either. I mean, I think it's true in entertainment, but what's the famous quote? Like, the victors are the ones that write history. So, you look at a textbook, how much are we telling the story about how many Native Americans there were on this continent before the white man arrived, and how many there were, 100 years later. I mean, the people who are in power get to tell the story. I always say that's why it's called his story, not her story. But yeah, I mean, I just think that's prevalent a lot of places. But it was probably mostly rich white guys that were making the first films too, right? And so it's like telling history. It's biased from the perspective of the person who tells it. I think I call that what Parenti was talking about. I call that "I know you are, but what am I?" syndrome. I think our current president is a master of it. Like, he came up with the term fake news, even though his main news source and what he puts out there is the fakest news going. So he does that all the time, accuses other people of things that he and his administration are doing.
Got it. So that's a great point. So you're saying, don't think this is just restricted to entertainment. This is happening in political discourse. This is happening in power relations more broadly. We're bringing it up in the context of looking at entertainment media, but it actually is a phenomenon that goes far beyond that. Okay, that is an interesting idea. Okay, so I think Parenti's lecture invites us to think about just something that you said, I thought very nicely, that how when we're consuming entertainment, we're not thinking about its ideological message. We're not thinking about its message, right? We're enjoying the ride. Its purpose is to entertain. And so Parenti's speech wants us to pay attention to the patterns in entertainment media that work against people's own interests, that encourage us to make decisions that essentially are not in our best interest. And I think that's a really interesting, I mean, that's a Marxist idea that takes us back to Chomsky and Herman and their idea of the 5 filters of the propaganda model, invites us to think about how power reproduces itself in the entertainment culture. And this takes our dialogue about propaganda in a way back to the beginning, as we think about the functions of propaganda as a lever on public opinion for social power to be enacted. When we think about entertainment, we don't necessarily think about how power relationships make things seem normal, but that's what the word hegemony means, right? It means making inequality seem normal by storytelling and by repetition, right? And so that idea of hegemony and the power of entertainment media to distance ourselves from our own interests and discourage us from making good decisions. That's a really interesting idea. I think it would be interesting to try to figure out if we could update Parenti's talk to the current day. And some of you are doing that. I did want to call attention to the Padlet that is developing. Of course, I've been filling it up myself because as I'm going through the week, I keep finding examples. I'm like, oh gosh, there are quite a lot of examples when you come to think about it. So here we are looking at entertainment propaganda this week. This work that I'm sharing with you isn't due till Friday, of course, so don't be nervous if you haven't done it yet, that's okay. But some of you have identified an example of entertainment propaganda, right? And I am really enjoying what you've put up so far. Of course, you've gotten stuff from the early part of the 20th century. I wouldn't necessarily call Reefer Madness a contemporary, but back from the 20s, right? But The Dictator looks like a new film. Hannah, thanks for sharing it. I, of course, put up The Interview. Did you guys see that? The comedy about the assassination attempt against North Korea. That was definitely an example of entertainment propaganda, right? We were making comedy out of killing a foreign leader, right? I mean, think about that. That's just unbelievable. The Purge. Olivia, thank you so much for sharing the film series from 2013 called The Purge. And of course, the classic Top Gun. And Battleship Potemkin, again, I wouldn't call that contemporary by any means, but certainly established in film history and Russian film history, a classic work of entertainment propaganda. So thank you for sharing these great examples of entertainment propaganda. I feel like one of the things that Oh, and that's another thing is I'm not exactly sure what's going on with your with your Spark pages, but I did see a couple. Anthony, did you complete one? I thought I might have seen one cross my desk from you. Is that true? This one right here. Who is this guy?
That's Anthony.
Yeah. So here's a example of a pretty nice Spark video using that graphic novel, the short graphic novel by the folks at the Nib, right? About how Palestinians are depicted in entertainment media. I thought that was a really good effort there. And in some ways, I do want to reflect on the really complicated ways that propaganda is depicted in the film Suffragette. One of the things that I guess I find so fascinating about it is that when I loved this film, and I hope you did too, right? But one of the things that I found really worth reflecting on is how I didn't like thinking about those British women as terrorists. I resisted that idea. And I started thinking about how my own attitudes about who is a terrorist and what do terrorists do has been shaped by propaganda, because I can't really imagine ever feeling like violence might be justified as a means of political change until I watched that film. And then it's like, oh yeah, I could do that, right? I could be a terrorist. And I started thinking about how in all of the years since 9/11, and even I remember as the towers fell, and you guys were just babies when that happened, weren't you? Right? But I remember when the Twin Towers fell thinking, why do they hate us so much? And thinking about how if only I knew what the cause of their anger was, that we could fix it. And of course, I since then got a chance to go to Tel Aviv and to meet Palestinians and to visit Lebanon and learn about the anger that people all over the Arab world have for the fact that the Palestinians' land was stolen from them and that 350,000 of them live in a prison where they don't have electricity, they don't have water. And this fundamentally wrong way that Israel is treating the Palestinians, that's the injustice that's making propaganda rise up in the Arab world. And how easy it was for me to identify with those British women suffragettes because they looked like me, right? I could I could sympathize with them.
So Renee, I want to bring us back to something that was in the introduction to the Parenti piece, where the narrator talked about how Ronald Reagan had called Osama bin Laden the moral equivalent of our, founding fathers or patriots. I think this is something that I see all the time in the world, is one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. And I think that's what we saw in Suffragette, was these were women who were obviously fighting for their rights and their freedom to vote, like as a citizen, who the laws that, were created act against them, and they just wanted a voice, and did, figured out that the way they needed to get attention was by these violent acts. The same thing happened with the Black Panthers here in this country. And it was the big debate between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King of whether we do it nonviolently or we do it by any means possible. I just think it's both time-based and perspective-based.
Yep. Yep. And so we're trapped in our biases, whether we call Osama bin Laden a terrorist or a freedom fighter. Because in 1985, he was a freedom fighter, but in 2003, he was a terrorist, right? So it is absolute. So then we can say that we understand how propaganda exists in a web that is situational and contextual. And so we cannot make blanket statements. We have to understand how our interpretations of people and events and situations are rooted in time and place. And I guess that probably prevents us from ever coming up with a simple explanation of propaganda, right? Because it is so situational and contextual. Okay, so I want to just spend a little bit talking about the work that you have due for me as we come to the close of the semester. Next week is our last full week. Our final topic is public interest propaganda. We're asking this important question. Let's see if I can share my screen with you. What are the beneficial functions of propaganda? Wow, we've spent the whole semester talking about all of the shitty, crappy, deeply problematic aspects. And now we end the semester thinking propaganda might be a good thing? Holy moly. Okay, let's see, what does this involve? I will view it as you might view it, as a student would view it. Let's see here. We're going to watch this really interesting video. It's called From 1 Second to the Next by Werner Herzog. Give me a thumbs up if you've seen this video before. Okay, so you're going to enjoy that. This was created by a famous director named Werner Herzog. He's a really incredible filmmaker. It's 4 little stories. Then you're going to read this short excerpt from an article called Why AT&T is Talking About Texting and Driving. And then after you read that little article, there are 2 questions for you to discuss. First, what was the most powerful moment of the film for you? This is an emotionally powerful film. And second, should corporations be expected to, I got to fix that sentence. Should corporations be expected to provide public service propaganda like this on issues of public concern? Why or why not? So this piece of propaganda created by AT&T may have an influence on your texting and driving behavior. And we're going to wonder, is that something we want corporations to do or not? Next, youth create pro-Kremlin propaganda. Watch this short video. This is just like a minute and a half. It's a video news release. You know that a video news release is like a press release, except it's a video. And it's a video news release about pro-Kremlin propaganda. But the video that we're watching is produced by the Voice of America. And the Voice of America is the official propaganda arm of the US government, right? It's the propaganda we share with the 170 countries. What happened there? 170 countries around the world. We just don't know what happened there. Where did I, Okay, I think I went way crazy there. I'll go back to my path right. So I'm telling you, you click in and voila, you lose everything. So this Voice of America is something I want you to do some investigation of. Okay, back to the path right. Okay.
You're on the next one.
Next one. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So after you watch this video, you're probably going to have some questions about what is the Voice of America. Learn more about the Voice of America through conducting a 10-minute internet search. So I want you to go find out whatever you can find out about the Voice of America and tell us what you learn, right? So we're going to explore propaganda produced by the US government, right? For good purposes, for good purposes. Now, this is extra credit, and some of you really need the extra credit. Not you guys, my best students who show up at the synchronous class. I worship you guys, but I'm talking to you, the rest of you who are watching this recording, and you guys can do this too as well. Jessica's and Tom and Pam and Anthony. This activity is part of an informal research project, but to participate, you have to follow the directions exactly. We're wondering, do all internet users receive exactly the same information when they search for information about countries? So we're going to compare kids in Rhode Island to kids in Germany and kids in Finland. It just so happens that I'm going to Germany and Finland next week, right? So we're going to look at what kind of search engine results you get when you type in the word Germany, the word Finland, and the word the United States. And all you have to do is this. After you're logged into your Gmail account, conduct a Google search using the term Germany and create a screenshot of the search engine results page. Then search on the term United States of America and create a screenshot of the search engine result page. And then search on the word Finland and create a screenshot of the search engine results page. What you create will look something like this. Very easy, right? What we're going to do is see if people around the world get the same content on their Google search engines. What's your hypothesis? Do you think that students from 3 different countries get the same results on their search engines when they type in these simple words?
No.
No. Why not?
Because there's different influences around them. So they're like, plus it depends on what you're searching too. So like I feel like us, like we aren't gonna get the same things necessarily either.
Yeah. So we know that the Google search engine uses the content of your emails, right? The other things you search on, and it customizes the search just for you, right? So we expect there to be some interesting differences within the American students in this class and between the American students, the Finnish students, and the German students. So that should be kind of a fun little project, and hopefully I'll be able to report for you on that in a little bit.
I've got a question about that.
Yeah.
So these days when I do a search, like the top of my search results are all ads.
Right.
Do you want the ads or do you want me to scroll down to the actual content?
Yep, I want the whole screen just as you see it, if it's got ads or whatever it has in it. Right? Okay. So just what I had to do is I just filled the screen, and whatever shows up on the top of your screen, that's what I want to see.
Okay.
Even if it's ads. Okay. Cool. Okay, so that's a small little project. And I have one other extra credit thing that I wanted to share with you. Oh, yes, of course. If you can find an example of beneficial propaganda, since that's our topic for next week, I will give you 5 points of extra credit. If you can find an example of contemporary, that means after the year 2000. If you can find an example of beneficial propaganda, maybe it comes across your Instagram, or maybe you see it, I don't know where you see it, whatever you do online, that you think is kind of beneficial, upload it to the Mind Over Media website, including a detailed description. Put your name in the login so that I know it's from you. I'll find it, and give you 5 points of credit. Now, we're not going to have class next Tuesday. That's April 23rd, because like I said, I'm going to be in Finland and Germany next week. But we will have class, our last class, on Tuesday, April 30th, right? And that's when I'll be reminding you about how important it will be for you to fill out the class evaluation. You know that the course evaluation is how you provide feedback about the value of the class as a learning experience, and it helps for university decision making, and it can be helpful in improving the quality of teaching and learning. So I hope you get a chance to do that. Then the 2 things that you owe me: Leap 3, which is due on May 3rd at midnight. Right? Leap 3 has 2 components. You're writing a listicle of the 10 top insights as you think about the overall learning experience of the class, and you create a Spark video where you highlight 3 of the most important ideas that you encountered in a video that's no longer than 4 minutes. That's a pretty big project, and you still have a few weeks for it. But almost immediately after you finish your Leap 3 is the final examination, which takes exactly the same structure as the midterm. You remember how that worked? It opened up. You signed an honor code telling me you were doing the work on your own, and then you completed about 10 short answer or multiple choice questions. What questions do you have about the work ahead of you as we steam to the end of the semester? Okay, that's really a good sign, but it also means you guys are tired. I understand. That's okay. You guys have a lot of work to do in the next 2 weeks. I'm not going to see you next Tuesday, but realize if you have any questions as you move forward in doing the work for your Leap 3, I'm very available on Twitter. I'll be on Twitter all the time. I'm in Germany. I'm going to be talking about propaganda while I'm in Finland and Germany, and I hope to be tweeting about it. I'll be using the COM416 hashtag so you can see examples of the kind of propaganda that I'm encountering over there, and also what people over there are saying about the propaganda that they see coming from the United States. So won't that be interesting? Okay, so thank you for joining me tonight. Always a pleasure. Yeah, you guys are working hard, I know. So I'm working hard to get the Leap 2s done. I keep saying just one more, but I actually have like 4 more to read. So, but soon I'll have them all done and I'll be sending those off to you. So hopefully by the end of the week, you'll see that feedback. So, all right, have fun this week, work hard, get enough sleep. I'll see you on the 30th for our last class. All right, bye now.